The footage of US President Joe Biden on the world stage is a metaphor for our times. His faltering and failing on the presidential campaign trail, his incomprehensible mumblings, his advanced decrepitude, even his fragility. Just as that old man is done, visibly confused, spent, and needing time not in the glare of the spotlight, but more likely in a care home or perhaps in jail, so is the collective establishment of the West. As the one dieth, you might say, so dieth the other. The most powerful man in the world, nominally at least, appears senile, and inside the machine that he represents, the marbles are running lost. President Biden is the wizened cherry atop a stale, worm-eaten cake. The metaphor of senility and decay might usefully be extended. All around President Joe Biden, Sippy Cup Joe, is gathered an increasingly rigid support structure, a scaffold to stop the decaying ruin from finally, inevitably falling over. For all their effort, denial and obfuscation, it's anyone's guess how long they can keep him upright. It's also anyone's guess how long the corrupted West can remain standing in its present form, if at all. When a civilization persists not by maintaining and spreading peace, but by spreading war, including stoking the fires of global thermonuclear war, then that civilization is civilized no more. Those supporters of Biden are likely much more desperate than the old man himself. They would have to be, because at the moment, though some would say not for much longer, he is their golden ticket, a tarnished golden ticket to the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. While the old man drifts along, unmoored from the minutiae of day-to-day reality, those around him know all too well that for the time being at least, if they don't keep him in place, watch and guide him moment by moment, then they lose their power, and they can't have that. In many ways, the bigger problem we face in the West is the way too many trusting souls seek only to perpetuate a system, indeed keep faith with a system that's no longer fit for purpose. President Joe Biden is done, and the collective response to his incompetence is only to find another to take his place. If the Biden swamp has its way, another factotum will be manoeuvred into place, another rictus grin to distract the masses while corrupted entities wring the last drops from the system. It's a similar situation on this side of the Atlantic. Our leaders and would-be leaders are not suffering senile dementia, but they are also factotums filling roles at the pleasure of others within a system that is visibly misfiring and winding down like an old clock, stuttering towards a final failure that, if not arrested in time, may yet be catastrophic for billions. As a consequence of so much that's wrong, so much that has gone wrong, more and more of our money, rights, freedom, even safety and security must be taken from the many so that a rotten few might maintain themselves in the style to which they are accustomed. Thousands of young men and women are already cold in the clay of Ukraine, sacrificed for profit, and the net for catching more sacrificial lambs spreads wider all the time. In the US, a bill is passing through Congress that will see every young man between the ages of 18 and 26 automatically registered for draft, and so ready for call-up for whatever wars America wants to fight, against Russia in Ukraine, perhaps against China over Taiwan. Running alongside that freshly minted US legislation, which has already passed through the House of Representatives, are moves to register all women of the same age range as well. A person might wonder what the authorities have in mind if they need everyone between the ages of 18 and 26 registered ready for drafting into the military. For anyone still labouring under the misapprehension that the state cares about you, wants you well, then perhaps the realisation that those psychopaths appear to be preparing to sacrifice more youngsters on the altar of the god of war might open more eyes to the fact those regarded as leaders, those supposed to care, mean to do quite the opposite. More and more, I wonder why so many people continue to think and act as if they need looking after anyway, looking after by some idealised grown-up with all the answers. Even after all these years, all these millennia in fact, the search is still on for the good king, the ultimate father figure to keep the monsters at bay. Implicit in that behaviour is the childish wish for rescue by a hero, by a knight in shining armour. If we don't waken up and accept that no one is coming to save us, More importantly, that we don't need someone to come and save us, then we will be trapped in the fairy tale forever. The merest investigation of most of those that are attracted by the idea of the top job, the job of telling everyone else what to do, reveals characters who turn their backs on their own failings as individuals and persuade themselves instead that it's their destiny to dictate how everyone else should live their lives instead. As the generations have come and gone, we have somehow been persuaded to surrender more and more control over our lives, over the lives of our families and communities, to distant individuals who neither know us nor care about us. Personally, I think this is madness. All the headlines and manufactured panic now are about the so-called right, which is to say popular parties talking about the need for secure borders and the preservation of national identities, the preservation of cultures and the defence of a religion that served us well for most of 2,000 years. The fear porn about fascists and the like is from those dependent on the status quo who fear any challenge to their anti-human agenda. Anyone speaking up for the people will therefore be demonised by the establishment as the right and the far right. But that's just to distract attention from the actual direction from which the real danger has come. The West now is being nudged ever closer to international communism, world communism, one world government by those that presume to address and conquer the endless complexities of life with simplistic one-size-fits-all policies. I say Marxism isn't even a political ideology. If Karl Marx was anything other than a freeloading parasite and envious malcontent, he was a theologian, and Marxism is a religion demanding faith and sacrifice, ideally the sacrifice of other people's money, and then finally of the people themselves. The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, those and others of the same ilk are only the latest products of a communist mindset. Previous applications of communism in Europe, in Asia, in the Americas have led always and only to piles of corpses numbering in the millions. World communism, one world government by communists, will surely lead to a pile of corpses greater than all of those that were raised during the 20th century and by an order of magnitude. I would say communism will fail again, and the evidence of history is that communism always fails, because by its very nature it fails individual human beings every time. Just this week, a story in the Dutch news carried the headline, "The Netherlands will have to get rid of the idea that electricity is available to everyone at all times." A first world country where politicians profess to live or die by progressive principles, walking back into the darkness of the days before the Industrial Revolution. Like rust, communism never sleeps and is always at work eroding the well-being of people and peoples. When confronted by this inevitability from the WEF and their "you'll own nothing and be happy" insanity, and from a Labour Party here in Britain led by a man who says he's more at home in Davos than in Westminster, the reality is stark. So that the latest fiddling around the edges by those still believing the creaking past their sell-by date institutions here may yet provide the answer to the bigger problem are tragically doing no more than bringing a knife to a gunfight. I don't want a revolution, by the way. Revolutions are optical illusions, circuses for the hapless gullible, exploited by part of the elite to knock the incumbent group of the elite off their perches to make room. The angry mob is only the tool of the elite, briefly used and then cast aside. The English Revolution was not by the people. The French Revolution was not by the people. The Russian Revolution was not by the people. The list of revolutions that weren't by the people goes on and on. I think what we need is closer to a renaissance or a renewal. I say some of what is actually needed is the reduction of the scale and reach of government. Government in its place and back in its box. And while we're at it, we should remember its more accurate description is not government anyway, but administration. People elected to administrations don't govern. They're supposed to do no more than represent and then administer the power of a population of sovereign individuals. As far as possible, people should be left alone to govern themselves, which they're eminently capable of doing if big government would simply get out of the way. And before anyone trumpets local government, as long as the party system prevails, local government is a busted flush too. The disguised bankruptcies of one after another being cases in point. One of the challenges we face is the inbred culture of dependency, by which I mean too many have been raised to look for help from strangers. Centralised taxation of every sort is utterly out of control, We have the greatest tax burden since the Second World War. And for what? Crumbling infrastructure at home while billions of our pounds are shipped abroad to be laundered through corrupt wars that produce nothing but the corpses of the innocent. Why is it greedy to want to make decisions about the use of money you've earned by your own efforts, but somehow not greedy to want to help yourself to money earned by someone else? Here's the thing. In the world of geopolitics, you might say there are no good guys anymore, just a miserable choice of dodgy characters, all pursuing their own self-interested ends, and to hell with the likes of you and me. But the mask has slipped. In recent years, and especially in the past few months, those that would lead the West have exposed themselves for what they really are, and it ain't pretty. As people waken up to the ugly truth, so too one nation after another is turning away from an old and bloodthirsty system, forging new alliances. After half a century of US dollar dominance, and in no small part due to the way that currency has been weaponised, more and more players on the world stage are trading in other currencies. No matter what they do now, the baddies are bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. What matters most is to take whatever steps are necessary at the ballot box and elsewhere to stop them taking the rest of us down with them. Now, let's have a chat with my aforementioned guest this evening, Alex Storey, Olympian and former Conservative Party candidate. Good evening, Alex.
How are you?
I am well. I know I covered a lot of topics there, but I do wonder, is America, the United States of America, that you and I grew up being told were the good guys, are they becoming, well, at the very least, some kind of international laughingstock?
Well, I think that's the right conclusion to take. The point I would make is that if you choose a leader like Joe Biden, you cannot expect people to take you that seriously. He is a representation, as you said, of a decaying West, or at least a moral decrepitude. There is nothing about the character that's good. If you go back into his past, you mentioned jail for him, and I suspect a lot of people in the US, if they knew the truth about him, or if they dug a little bit deeper, they would agree with you that that's probably where he should end up if he doesn't die beforehand. But what I've come to think about since over the last few years is thinking about America as one of the bad actors in the world, whereas I'd never thought that. When I was a child in the 80s, America was on the good side of the argument, and probably you and I would have watched Rambo, 1 and 2, and perhaps not 3 because it wasn't such a great film, but although I did watch it, but then the week later the wall came down, so it was no longer quite so relevant. But the Noam Chomsky view of the world was something that I rejected absolutely, because I couldn't contemplate the West being that bad. And actually, over the course of time, over the last few years, I've started to think, hang on, we have been the bad actors, the West, led by America, not by the American people. I'm not I'm not accusing the American people of being of doing bad things. I'm accusing the administration, if not the elected representatives of America, of being the bad actors. But it's been amazing to see this shift.
I listen. I'm not proposing or suggesting for 1 minute that that there are any good guys. I'm not on anyone's side when it comes to geopolitics. I just observe, and I wonder at this perpetuation, which seems utterly naive to me now, of our side as the goodies. You know, since 1980, I made a note. The US has bombed or invaded, well, Iran, Lebanon, Grenada, Libya, Panama, Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, Yemen, Somalia, and Niger.
Yeah,
I think I mentioned Somalia twice. However, and yet, at the same time, is held up as just an unquestionable force.
No, but that's the point. I think the only thing that you can be in geopolitical affairs is be an observer, because there's not much that you and I can shift or change. And I think the really interesting thing about having good and interesting discussions with good people is that you can make objective observations. It's one of the reasons why I'm quite ambivalent on the war in Ukraine, because I was very aware in '99 that we were doing something that was fundamentally wrong. The bombing of Serbia, remember, really shook me to my core because I thought, my God, we're bombing a European city.
Going to have to pause for a break, after which I'll be joined by Holocaust survivor Vera Sharaf to talk about her latest documentary. You're watching The Neil Oliver Show on GB News.